There we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our next of our Comrades Marathon Bonitas online seminars. It's awesome to have you with us. I hope you can all see the slide that's up on the screen right now and you can hear me. Please, if you can, give us a thumbs up on or below this video. And if you wouldn't mind as well, let us know where you're joining us from. So in the comments below, tell us where you're from and where you're watching this webinar from this evening as well. So it's good to have you on, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us. With me tonight, we've got a full house, not just Lindsey, Parry and myself, but we're also joined by Nicki de Villiers. Let me introduce the coach. Lindsey, welcome onto the webinar. Thanks for joining us.
How's it, Brad? Yeah, thanks to everyone for accommodating me. Flying off to the land of the silver white cloud on Sunday, so we just had to move to tonight, but yeah, appreciate it, and looking forward to spending the next hour with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lindsey, that's thanks for reminding me. Apologies once again for us shifting the time and the date of tonight's webinar. Unfortunately, as Lindsey mentioned, he is off to the Commonwealth. I say unfortunately, I think it's great. Off to the Commonwealth Games, which is taking place in the Gold Coast, but he's off to New Zealand first for a little training camp. And then a third member of our panel this evening is Nicki de Villiers, who's a dietitian, nutritionist based at the High Performance Centre in Pretoria, worked with some of the biggest sporting teams here in South Africa, some of the biggest athletes as well. Nicki, welcome on. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invite. Really a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Nicki, you're no stranger to Comrades either. If anybody's been to one of the road shows or novice project seminars or lady seminars over the last few years, they may have come across you, so you know the race quite well and what it takes to be successful from a nutrition, hydration point of view when it comes to Comrades.
Yeah, hard work out there, but we can make it easy.
It's half the battle won. All right, fantastic. We've got lots of messages coming through. If you wouldn't mind as well, just hitting the share button. If you are in a Comrades group, or if you're in a running group and you've got running mates or a running club that you think would get value out of this webinar, please just, if you wouldn't mind sharing it into those Comrades groups or your running clubs groups as well, it would be massively, massively appreciated. And as always, please pop your questions into the comments below if you've got any questions, and we will get to them a little bit later on in tonight's webinar. The plan is to run through our program quickly as we can and then really open up the floor and chat particularly lots about nutrition, because now's the time to get it all dialed in. So what are we going to chat about this evening? There's essentially three things we want you to take out of tonight's webinar. It's where you should be right about now. All you need to do is focus on the next 4 weeks and how to put a nutrition plan together between now and Comrades Race Day to ensure you have the most successful Comrades Marathon possible. Just a massive thank you to our sponsor as well, Bonitas, for making these online seminars possible, and also to Comrades Marathon for allowing us to do it as well. Lindsey, I'm going to let you get started with regards to what we are chatting about tonight. I think that's probably going to be the easiest. Is let's talk about where people should be sort of right about now and what they should be focusing on.
Yeah, so we've been saying over and over and over again that it's not really about training too hard now. Well, guess what? The time is now. So we are into March. We're actually into the middle of March. So with Comrades moving to the 10th of June, just before the middle of the month, we are now in Comrades training season. One of the Comrades greats, probably the greatest Comrades runner, Bruce Fordyce, always says, don't worry too much about what happened in January and February. It's all about what happens in March and April. That's where we are now. So it is time to get going. My training partner always loves to say it's never, and I disagree with him, but when we get to March, it is time to panic. The real heavy lifting starts now, and we really should be into the swing of things. We should be, for the most part, from that qualifying effort for the most part, and we should be focusing all our energy on training.
Fantastic. Lindsey, we get lots of questions in with regards to people asking us sort of, they're struggling with a bit of a niggle, or their training is not quite where it should be. But like you rightly say, now's the time, and the next 12 weeks are crucial. It's almost not that it doesn't matter what's happened before this. Ideally, you want that strong base, but the next 12 weeks are the real crucial weeks to making sure you have a successful Comrades.
Yeah, I've got one or two clients that are struggling with a little bit of a niggle, and that's really what we've been discussing over the last couple or days, is to say that whatever the time to get it sorted out, like now, because if you want to have a successful means different things for different people. If you're a 7.5 hour runner and you spend the next 3 or 4 weeks out, well, then your Comrades isn't going to suffer, but your chance really slipping away from you. If you're a Bill Rowan candidate, same thing. You're Bill Rowan slipping, but you can probably finish. The people that are in dire straits really are the finishers, the people that are in that kind of 11:30 to 12 hour bracket. They really need to get treatment, get sorted out, get training. Swimming, these sort of things will help. They'll only get you so far. You really want to, right now, you want to be running.
All right, fantastic, Lindsey. Let's talk about sort of where the different medals, what they should be focusing on for the next 4 weeks, and let's start with the slowest, move to the fastest. Let's start with the finishers.
Yeah, so on all the programs, the principles are the same. So I'll cover the principles very briefly, and that is to say that now we are building to or very close to that peak. So for the finishers, perhaps there's still a little bit of a build going on through this program, and we'll probably hit the real peaks in next month. But yeah, for the finishers, I would say, like, in this month, we're targeting 60 Ks a week pretty consistently. Your finishers, your bronze medal guys should be getting quite close to their peak already, and that peak will be somewhere in the region of 75 to Ks at the top end for the quite experienced runners, and we'll be quite close to that mileage, sort of moving from this week coming. Monday, I think that's the 19th, Monday the 19th. For that week, that's when we'll start hitting that peak training. Bill Rowan, guys, you're looking at around 90, possibly 100 Ks. Again, it depends a little bit on your own personal experience. 90 Ks is probably enough. 100 Ks is on the upper end. And then for the silver medalists, we're getting into the 120 all the way into about the 160 range. Again, depending on exactly where on that silver spectrum you're aiming for, but certainly you'll be getting to 120, 30 out of. As I said, some people will be getting to around 160 Ks a week.
All right, fantastic, Lindsey. And then looking at, with regards to, I mean, we've seen it so often, people really chasing the mileage and putting in tons and tons of miles. What's your advice there?
Yeah, so I actually had a chuckle as I looked down on my notes here, because when I sent this through to Brad, I sent it through as "Don't chase the lays," and we did bags of chips at this time of the Comrades training. So yeah, don't chase kilometers. Okay, so I've given you a broad kind of range of general population kilometers that you should be running, but you'll have. Hopefully most of you have got a program. It's been worked out by somebody that you trust. It's possible. At a certain point. So don't get worried about what you're not doing. In other words, when you hear people talking about doing marathon after marathon or an ultra and a marathon a week apart, forget about what other people are doing. Worry about what you are doing. Don't chase kilometers needlessly. Stick to your plan. Chances are you've already had some good successes along the way. you've probably qualified or run PB on a half marathon, but there have been some signs there that your running is improving and that things are going well. So just stick with that process and see it through, and it's going to stand you in good stead, and it's going to give you the best chance of getting the medal that you are training for. You don't know what medals other people are training for, you going for. You don't know what niggles they may pick up going forward, but don't feel pressurized into playing someone else's game. Play your own game.
Yeah, and that is vital. That comparison game can be it can be so sort of self-defeating at this stage of the of your training, where you see people posting on Facebook or how many Ks they've done since the beginning of Jan, and if you haven't done that much, it's easy to feel like you're not on track. But that's a vital point you make, is don't worry about what everybody else is doing, because you don't know their circumstances or what their goals are. Just worry about yourself at this stage.
No, absolutely. Look, and it's human nature to worry and check and see what other people are doing. But I've already had a couple of clients phone and go, oh, so-and-so is doing this. Are you sure we're doing enough? And then I to what we've done in the past and show them that we're actually already doing a bit more, and look at what your performances were on the previous. I asked them, this person that you are so worried is doing more than you, how did they do compared to you last time? Oh, no, I finished far ahead of them. I'm like, well, then what are you worried about? Why do you want to follow someone's plan that's finished behind you? Stick to your plan. So it's human nature to question and get unsure. That'll get worse, by the way, in the last 3 to 4 weeks as we taper into comps. But have faith in the course that you've chosen. By choosing this course, you've actually set things in motion, which mean that there's only certain building steps you can take without unnecessarily risking getting sick or injured. So have faith in what you've chosen and see it through.
Cool. Lindsey, and then also one thing we chat about often is no racing. And I know there's a couple of ultras coming up. People are running Two Oceans. People are running Omni Dam here in South Africa. Now's not the time to pick up an ultra EB.
No, so really, I've stressed this so many times in the talks leading up to this particular talk, and I've really stressed it in the road shows we've done around the country, locally. Once you've qualified, just take what you've got. You don't want to be chasing PBs now. Really, everything should be about, and really the way that I try and get people to understand. All you're doing really is winning yourself 2 to 4 minutes maximum race day. But what you're doing is you compromising your training for a good 2 to 3 weeks after that effort. And you're compromising that training, and as I've emphasized over and over tonight, you are compromising in the most important part of the training. So you're probably going to lose more than 2 to 4 minutes in ability or fitness or conditioning. And so going for that better seeding is actually just compromising your race more than the time that you gain. Rather spend the time to make yourself a 10, 15 minute better athlete on race day and save yourself much more than 2 to 4 minutes by just being a better runner.
Absolutely. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below. That's where you can get your questions in. There are lots of questions coming through, which is great, and we will get to them towards the second half of this webinar. And that's the plan, is to get through the content we wanted to cover tonight, and then hopefully we've answered most of the questions, and then if we haven't, we can do some serious Q&A for the latter part of tonight's webinar. So keep those questions coming through, and we'll get to those in a second. Cool. Lindsey, I'm going to bring Nicki in now, and let's chat some nutrition, if that's good. Nicki, let's talk. This is something that a lot of Comrades runners struggle with. It's difficult to get right, and it takes time, it takes practice, and you can't get it right on race day. You've got to practice it now. And you've sort of run through a bit of a checklist on sort of particularly putting a race plan together now to ensure success on Comrades race day, correct?
Yeah. Listening to Lindsey and all the distances that's being covered is the time that you're covering those distances. You need to figure out what you're going to do with eating. And you really need to try a few things, not just try one thing and think, it didn't work, and we can't do this one. I'm not going to do that. So for most of the part of the training, you'll be hungry, so eat according to hunger. I think, but eat well according to hunger. So don't eat junk, but eat more food. The race, but I want to concentrate more on that, concentrating on what to do before, during, and after, and play around with that. And I think really understand the magnitude of this race, but also understanding the magnitude of the amount of energy that you spend on this race. It's not one slice of toast; it's not going to get you there. So the checklist basically involves, first of all...
If I could just jump in there, though, quickly as well. As much as we're talking about race day at Comrades, now's the time to get this sorted. You don't want to wait until Comrades race day, particularly everyone's running their ultras, their club long runs, and this is an opportunity to work out what does work and what doesn't work. So that's why we're talking about it now. So as much as we're talking about race day, it's not just Comrades race day. It's whether it be Two Oceans or Umdidam or that club run.
All the... I think even looking at trainings as races now. So whatever we do on race days, that you do it in training, because the training is now nice and long, so you can really try out a few things while you're out there. And I think also make mistakes that we do some of the trainings without any kind of support. Nutrition can, and I know they can, but there's a different type of training involved here. It's not only to get through this run, but it's to test stuff, to see what's working and what's not. So you're, definitely right. So treat trainings as races in terms of nutrition stuff. So the first question to ask is, are you eating before you're racing? I think, or training for that matter then. And if the question is no, start eating. That's your first check box. Then the question would probably come up, what are we eating? And that is a carbohydrate. A carbohydrate can come then from either starchy stuff, your porridges, your oats, cereals, crackers, rusks, whatever people are used to eating, but also then can come from the fruit side. If you want to eat fruit before you go, it's going to be increasingly more difficult because it's not that easy to eat that early, but you have to maybe force a bit here. If we finish in terms of what we're eating and it's a carb predominant thing, we need to understand when to eat this meal. And because of the after 3-4 hours, luxury that we eat prior to. So the closer we get to running, so if you only have an hour, it will still make sense to eat something. And the nice thing is you can train your gut to get used to what we're doing, and that's part of the training. So if we eat 1 today, we can eat 2 tomorrow and try and push it a little bit and see how far we can go with this, because then obviously when you're in your race, you can maybe skip 1 or 2 water tables without, needing fuel on that stage. So as I said, we won't have 3 to 4 hours. Eat, even if it's just an hour to go, and make sure that you train your gut by, increasing the carbohydrate as we go along. So that would be in terms of the when. So, ideally, an hour or 2 hours prior to. If you have longer races, then obviously you have the luxury of that. Much of the stuff, I think working with runners, the answer to this would always be what we're taking at the moment. There is specific guidelines of how much you should eat. It's planned on kilogram of body weight. I'm not going to really talk grammage here. But I think the main thing there is to just, as I said, appreciate how far you're going to run and understand how much that is going to take. So if you're currently eating 1 slice of toast, please increase into 2. 1 rusk would go to 2. If you eat 1 wheat bix, make it 2 wheat bix. So try and increase it a little bit so that we can see what your stomach can hold on that day. So that is important. The other thing that we need to check after the carbohydrate intake is that you drink something. So make sure that when you wake up, to drink something immediately, because we want to go into all trainings and races hydrated. Otherwise, it's going to be a really long day out there. And coming from shorter runs or shorter trainings, we usually, wake up and go and run. We don't really, look at these things, and we can hydrate when we come back. But again, you should be with liquids and food in the stomach. It doesn't have to be a lot of it, but again, start drinking something. If that something is then whatever liquid it is. I mean, anything except for alcohol, please. But if it's your coffee, if it's your tea, if it's your juice, just drink the liquid, and that you're fully hydrated there. If you look at what not to do in this meal, I think that is also important. So what should we not eat? And the main thing there is to really appreciate that if you put any kind of fat or protein in your stomach, it takes from the stomach. So you're going to run with, boiled eggs and bacon in your stomach, probably most of that race that you're going to run. So important to keep fat intake quite low in that hour prior to going into training or races. Important that you can add a little bit of protein, just make it low fat. So you can really do low fat milk, have a little bit of cheese on the toast. Just keep the stuff low fat and not swimming in oil and fat. That protein will definitely then prevent hunger as we go along. So that sometimes also helps. Try to limit the fat content, and if you're not the time to gun it, all right. So if you're not used to eating any breakfast, doing a whole wheat rusk or doing a plate of all bran flakes or those kind of things can bring you into trouble. So you can also, again, you can train your gut to get used to it, but don't do it first time, especially on your ultras, because it can be a long day out there. So rather do it in the shorter trainings then, if you want to include fiber in this meal. Coffee, some people has always got a question around coffee. Some people are brilliant on coffees. Other people, it can cause a bit of discomfort in the stomach. So this is where you really need to individualize and see what works for you and what doesn't. So there's some of the foods that will really influence some individuals. But again, don't listen to everybody out there. Try what works for you. If coffee causes diarrhea, don't do it. If fiber causes diarrhea, don't do it. If you can't have milk, don't do it. But don't just stop then. We can make sure that you have enough on board. Then during that race, I think important also to, by now, people know what's on the water tables usually. They know it's pretty much the same things that's available. If you train with the things that's there, that would help a lot. But the main thing there is start early, do it regularly, and do it really aggressively in the beginning, so that if there's trouble at the end of the race, that you don't have to rely on that. So it's usually that we work out the schedule that works for you. There must be regular carbohydrate intake. So regular carbohydrate intake, I prefer about 2 feedings. Or if it's gels or those kind of things, just keep the fluid intake up as well on the other side. So if we can have 3 feedings in an hour where it's 1 carbohydrate feeding, 1 water feeding, 1 carbohydrate feeding, that would be good. And then try and do it for as long as possible as you can stomach food into that race. Don't overdo it, because then you're going to be nauseous later on. So little bits often. And then the main thing there, also recovery, not so much on Comrades race days, but race days now, it's really important to recover quickly after that race. So really to make sure that we have a carbohydrate source immediately after, that you recover from dehydration. You will be thirsty, so drinking shouldn't be that much of a problem. And they will probably, the idea would be if you include a protein in that mix. So therefore make sure you get to food soon after your race. With soon I mean within, if we can get it within half an hour, start feeding on something or drinking something, that would be good. If we can start feeding, within an hour and then repeat in 2 hours. So sometimes if the race was hard or it was hot, then we don't have that much of the appetite immediately, but start with something that's tolerable. And this also, Steristampy work for you to do it. If you want to drink a cup of soup, you do it. Whatever starts that process of recovering, because there is not that much time to just recover, take off so many days and then start your run again. So it's important that we really aid recovery by eating quickly. And as I said, a carbohydrate, a protein, and enough liquid soon afterwards.
Perfect. Nicki, that's awesome. And I think that gives us a really sort of nice groundwork to sort of get to the questions. And there are quite a few coming through, which is great, both training and nutrition related, which is fantastic. I also noticed a couple of people struggling with audio issues. If you are struggling with audio issues, obviously it is internet, so it depends on your speed as much as it does our speed. We are recording the session. It will be on Facebook. We also will put a version up on YouTube as well. So if you are struggling with audio, apologies. Sometimes these sort of speed issues are out of our control. I know between the three of us, we're on fiber most of us. So unfortunately, if there is audio issues, it is out of our control. Let's get to some of those questions and let's ask some of them. Nicki, or let me actually bring Lindsey in here, because Lindsey, I think you might be able to answer this as well. And I think it's a great question with regards to what is available on the actual route itself. A question in from Thomas Hansen. Thomas, thanks for the question. Thomas wants to know what's available food and or fluid-wise at the aid stations on the Comrades route.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm going to answer it, and then I want to pull Nicki on quickly, because there's been a bit of panic on the internet about Coca-Cola in particular, so I'll just bring it in there to everyone's mind at ease. But so there will be a water station every 3 kilometers through the race. Important to note is that as we get further, those water points get bigger and bigger and longer, to the extent that from the end of one until the start of the next is actually more like 2 kilometers. So as you get deep in the race, there's plenty to drink, and there's also a fair amount to eat. So at every water point there will be water, Coke, and Energade. Okay, so Coke's got about 11 grams per 100 mils of carbohydrates. Energade's got 7 grams per 100 mils. So that just helps you, work out your requirement per hour. I don't know if Nicki's going to touch on that, but it's useful information. Then one of the Comrades sponsors this year is Race Food. So they are also going to be having at selected water points, there will be Race Food, which is basically like an energy bar, a nougat-based energy bar. There will be at selected water stations chopped up potatoes, chopped up baby potatoes, crisps, things like jelly beans. There's chocolate at some of the water stations. That's fairly infrequent. And is only at certain water points. So, look, there really is plenty to keep you going along the way. You shouldn't need to carry much of your own stuff. So, again, typically we tend to carry things like gels, but that's stuff that you would then be more comfortable with and stuff that you've trained with. And it's probably a good idea to, in at least some races, to try Coke and Energade and see how you go on that. And then, there's been some pretty, look, I suppose with Coke this is always going to be the case, but there's been some fairly the internet, Nicki, about the effects of the sugar in Coke in particular, as well as the caffeine, neither of which are particularly bad for you while you are exercising, and that's Coke causes massive fluctuations in blood sugar level because you get insulin spikes and so on. So I just want to bring you in here, probably a good opportunity just to let people know that that's not something you have to worry too much about on race day.
Yeah, no, Lindsey, fully agree. Coke is something that's available on every race that they race. So that's really cool if you even can make yourself used to drinking Coke. So some people will experience discomfort. It's individual, so it can be the bubbles. You can drink flat Coke to overcome that. Some people towards the caffeine. Again, something that you should try. But you must remember, you're also not drinking a liter of Coke at a water point. That's also. Looking at, as you say, the carbohydrate content of stuff, of Coke being 11 grams on 100 mils and the others just the 7 gram, that if you're somebody that's not good with drinking and good with taking in carbs and good with eating, Coke would probably then give you more, bang for your buck in terms of that you're drinking it. So I'm totally with you that the sugar spikes and the drops, if insulin is really suppressed whilst we're running, so you're not going to have to drop because of the insulin. If you experience a drop, it's because properly the muscle is doing much more job than what the insulin is doing. Having the Coke pushes the sugar up, you feel better, and therefore you run a little bit harder. And that is the drop that you experience. It's probably time for more Coke rather than trying to avoid the Coke as such. So yeah, train with the things, and we are looking at about 30 per hour that you're out there. It depends obviously on how fast you run, but that was into the feeding 3 times, rather 10 or 15 grams, twice or 3 times throughout an hour, rather than trying to take, the whole 30 or 40 grams once in the hour. So that would mean a sip of Coke, a sip of Energade, and maybe one of the race food bars, which is about 15 grams. So that is important that you work it out according to that, but it's not excessive intake. It's really just sips and bits continuously.
Awesome stuff. Another great question here, and Lindsey, you touched on this. It is from Kerry Collins. Kerry wants to know, carrying nutrition with you, any advice on that? I know a lot of the clubs have sort of tables or stations along the way where you can leave bags with the clubs. I'm not sure, Bruce Fordyce, is it Complete Marathons, if they've got the sort of special needs for that you can almost buy spots at. What's the story, Lindsey? What do you advise?
Yeah, so look, there's only so much you can carry when a race is 90 kilometers. I mean, there's only so much space you've got. So even if you want to wear a 1980s moon bag, which I believe is coming back into fashion, my wife threatened I bought one, so I won't be doing that. You could run with a massive moon bag. So I think realistically you can't carry an enormous amount. So, gels are to carry. Again, those race food bars are also fairly small and pack a little bit of a punch, but carrying things like potatoes or bananas, that becomes a bit cumbersome. And if that is the sort of thing that you like to have on the side of the road and you don't want to trust having to wait until you get to water points, then you do need to rely on either somebody bringing you that stuff on the side of the road or club tents. And Brad alluded to the South African system of the clubs, where they normally have between 2 and 3 spots on the route where they'll set up a tent and the guys will stay there all day, and then as the individuals from the club roll through there, they'll get a bit of this and that, and off they go. For the internationals, that's obviously a little bit easier. And then Brad was talking about Bruce Fordyce and his crew, Ultimate Marathons, I think you said it was called, I think that is right. And they will have 2 points along the way. So you would bring your stuff to a point at probably in the international runners area. They'll have a point there, or certainly they'll have a point somewhere at the expo where you come along and put everything into that goodie bag. So if you do run with gels, for example, and you need 10 to get you through Comrades, you could start with 3, pick up 3 at the first tent, and get another 3 at the second tent. And it's pretty reasonable carrying 3 gels, but it's really not that reasonable carrying 9 to 10. I mean, there's really not much space to keep them.
Absolutely. Lindsey, I think it's called Complete Marathons, if I remember correctly, and I know their drop-off point is at they do it in the foyer of the Hilton Hotel. So if you want to find out more, just Google it. And I know Bruce Fordyce is very involved. So particularly the international runners, that's nice, who don't have a sort of circle of support here in South Africa. That's fantastic. They don't just do it for the international runners. If you are South African and you want to make use of that service, you are able to as well. I'm not sure the pricing. You would have to check that with them as well. A great question in here with regards to magnesium from Gum Gamble, saying, what role does magnesium play in combating cramp, and should we be taking this from now to the build-up?
Comment on here, Lindsey can follow up.
Yes.
Magnesium is important. Does it prevent cramping? Not necessarily. Depends on if there's a magnesium deficiency in the cramp. Because of that, then magnesium will help. But all cramping is definitely drinking magnesium. Now, usually if you eat the amounts that you should eat because you're so hungry, and you make it good food choices, so I eat food to get the extra energy, I don't go on scrappy eats, then your intake should be more than enough in terms of magnesium. Those of us that follow a little bit of a lower carb diet for whatever reason, they tend to have a bit of a higher risk, because, to have lower. And then also magnesium nuts and whole grains, that's our main sources. So if you get enough of that, I don't think it's a necessity to supplement. Would the supplement do damage? Probably not, but if you overdo the supplement, magnesium has got it's got a tendency to really just cause gastric discomfort with a bit of diarrhea. So you can try it out for the cramping. If it doesn't help, if 1 doesn't help, 2 is not going to make a difference, and 3 is definitely not going to help. So it doesn't more and more and more. I really would stay clear. If you're going to go on magnesium supplements closer to the race, now's the time maybe to start it. Not working. So whatever you want or tend to take in the week before you go into the race, try it now. Do it now, because these are how we feel. But is it a necessity? Probably not. Is it necessary if I'm not eating well? Yes, probably yes.
Lindsey, anything to add there?
No, look, only really that almost all cases of cramping during exercise are caused from fatigue rather than a nutritional issue. So, I would rather say that if you're cramping post-exercise or if you're cramping at night, then you might want to look at what sort of nutritional shortages you have. But otherwise, generally, you are better off dealing with cramp by planning your race better. So in other words, you may be running outside of your abilities. You can add in loads of walk breaks. So doing lots of short walk breaks can help to prolong the time to cramping. Strength training can help. Training can help, and obviously the more years of which you run, the better it should become.
All right, fantastic. Lindsey, thank you for that. Any questions, please pop them in the comments below. We've got quite a few come through already. I'm flicking through them and looking what is there. But if you have a question that you'd like answered, now's your time. Speak now or forever hold your peace. It's a great question, and let me pop it up onto the screen if I can. It's from Bix. Lindsey, Bix wants to know, are the clubs allowed to be seconding on the routes this year? I haven't heard any different. I don't know if you have.
No, so look, there has been a lot of comment, particularly from the professional clubs, where they aren't happy that the amateur runners treated differently to the pros, and that the pros get penalized for doing things that the amateurs allowed to do. So strictly speaking, in the road running rules, it's probably not allowed. However, the water pools generally tend to be stationary, which already means that they have a better chance of being within the regulations, and it'll be a hell of a thing because they need to provide the technical officials. It'll be a hell of a thing for them to stop effectively thousands of runners, because the club system in South Africa is really strong. And if you look at the number of clubs that are on the side of the road dishing things out, the number of family members that are on the side of the road dishing things out, I think what you'll find that 2/3 qualified. So I think it's unlikely that they will outlaw that completely, and they certainly haven't. I see all the Comrades press releases, and there certainly hasn't been a press release linked to that.
Right, fantastic. That's good news, Bucks. I hope that helps. And yeah, my theory is, Lindsey, if the top guys can come run with the rest of us for 12 hours, they can get as much support as they like as well. I think that would only be fair. So run at that pace for 12 hours, we see who's still standing. We got lots of questions coming through. Nicki, I'm going to throw this one to you. Bruce is dead keen to know about ketones. He's asked the question quite a bit tonight, so let's chat about that. Obviously, you've spoken a bit about carbohydrate and that sort of thing. This advice is not one size fits all. You've got to figure out what works for you, and it's the same thing with running on low carb or if you're in ketosis. What's the deal with ketones? Obviously, Bruce is looking into running sort of while in ketosis. Do you know? Can you give us some advice on that?
Yeah, there is obviously some attempts. Let's put it like that. We don't have results from studies like that, but I'm sure people can make themselves used to running on ketones. you basically just lose a fifth gear, speed gear, which shouldn't be that much, of the issue. It depends on what your goals are in terms of how you want to finish. So the main thing is, if you're going to run on ketones, you should by now start getting used to it. So it takes quite a long adaptation period. It's not about taking the ketone supplement on the day of the race. That's not going to help anything. So it takes a really long adaptation period. During that adaptation, your best. And the sessions that's probably going to suffer would be something like your speed sessions, your things. You really will suffer in those sessions, but it's not impossible to do it. I just think that once you decide on what you're going to do, you need to gun it and you need to stick to it. What I often find is people going on, ketosis for a while, and then, but over weekends, we leave it a bit, and then in the week we go onto it again. And then also the next question, usually on the ask me then, what do I need to eat on the road? And ketones, you don't need to eat on the road. You need to drink stuff. But there's no need for taking in fat whilst you're on the road, or that we have to supply all of a sudden butter or druivels or olives or whatever you need to run on. So that makes the race really then fairly. But are you going to be out there for longer than you intend? Yeah, I do believe you will. So if you want to try it, you need to really work through an adaptation period and see if it works for you. This is not following a high-fat diet or low-carb diet for a week and see if it works. It takes a bit longer than that.
Yeah, and in saying that too, Nicki, now's not the time to start figuring out if that's the way you're going to run Comrades. You should have a basic plan in place already. If that's the way you've been training up till now, fantastic. But now's not the time to start making such a drastic change in your diet, I think. And I may be way off. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, no, probably. I mean, they probably have still enough time to adapt. But then, if stuff goes wrong, it's going to go wrong. So it's a risk. It's really a risky thing to do. Ask that, what is the reason for this? And if it's really performance orientated, that you think you're going to be faster, I don't think there's not enough evidence to support that. A lot of people will tell me that it's maybe for weight loss. If I'm lighter, I will run faster. Yeah, there's easier way to get more comfortable ways. But it is a risk. It's a risky thing to do now. I would rather do it after Comrades, try in the front part of the year to, just run a few and see how it works for you.
Absolutely. All right. Question time. Let me add Lindsey in as well, because I think, Lindsey, this is probably one for you. It's from Brian Yelisi. Brian is saying that he's really struggling with a bout of flu. He's had 2 bouts over the last month. Just a bit of background. He's also lost about 4 kgs over the same period. Is it possible that the weight loss is affecting his immune system? We've also had a question in about a flu jab. Lindsey, would a flu jab in a case like this be good? And someone was asking, if you are going to do it, when is the time? Is it too late? But let's chat to Brian's problem.
Look, so it's quite unusual to get flu twice, because generally speaking, once you've had flu, and that's kind of the point of an introduction of a small amount of flu, but then it'll protect you against that strain of flu. So if you've gotten flu, it's possible, I guess, that you've got 2 separate strains of flu. But even that is quite unusual because the strains tend to be more seasonal. But yeah, if it's been a genuine reinfection, you were properly better before you started training again, and that starting of training would have dropped your immune system slightly, especially if you were in that you didn't actually let yourself get properly better before you then caused the symptoms to worsen. And then also, 4 kgs of weight loss in a short period of time will absolutely hammer your immune system. So look, sudden changes in anything put enormous stress on the body, and any time you put stress on the body, that drops your immune system. So for me, is to make sure that you're completely asymptomatic, and that when you start training again, you do so by building up over time. So don't just throw yourself straight back into the mileage that you were running just before you were sick. You need to take 2 to 3 weeks to get back up to that mileage so that you can allow your immune system to build up, because we know some exercise is good for and helps to boost the immune system. But most importantly, by building up, strain back on that your immune system and get sick again. The other thing to just check on is that, I mean, you may have had flu, and then by exercising when you weren't totally healthy, giving yourself a secondary infection or a slightly different type of illness, but that's because you again just allowed that immune system to get too low. So, eat healthy, get your vitamins, get lots of sleep, make sure you're healthy, and then build up slowly. Those are the best bits of advice I can give you.
Cool stuff. All right, another great question in. We were talking about hydration. It's actually the second time from the second person, we've had a question about overhydration. This one comes from Helga. She says, I keep on overhydrating because I seem to get too thirsty and then I just get nauseous. How do I combat it? Let's, if we can, touch on the overhydration bit and then sort of what the symptoms are and how to combat it and avoid it, essentially.
Okay, the overhydration, I mean, there is some factors. If she's slow and she's running at the back, the fact that she's a woman, that will put you at risk. It's for me weird that that she stays thirsty and drink according to thirst and then overhydrate. So the obvious thing there would be that in your mix that you're drinking to maybe add electrolytes in there, that she's maybe, either losing too much of the fluid, and then if you add to electrolytes, you seem to retain much more of the fluid. So that's the one thing. And then also a matter of training. So it takes a little bit of training as well in terms of how to run, with the liquid that you're taking, and now to overtake liquid on a little bit further before you drink. The fact that she's nauseous, that can obviously then also be a big problem, because it also tells us a little bit about overdrinking. Also then adding the electrolyte drink to that, because the electrolytes and sugar in drinks make you clear the stomach faster. So it really makes you, not only the stomach, but it makes you into the gut sooner. So she should maybe look at an electrolyte replacement with that. Not excessive, and I won't necessarily tell her to have electrolytes of absolutely all the drinks that she's drinking, but that would be definitely one aspect that I would consider, listening to what she complained about.
All right, fantastic. Lindsey,
I just want to add something. Yeah, I want to add something in, and this is just from articles I've read, so it's really not my area of expertise. So I'm quite happy for Nicki to tell me I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But one of the aspects that I've read about in hyponatremia in particular is that the actual hyponatremia is caused by an electrolyte imbalance. So in other words, the excess fluid, for lack of a better term, has drowned out those electrolytes. So if you are remaining thirsty, could that not be a sign from the body, not that you need more water, but that you actually need more salt or and by trying to quench your thirst, you are actually exacerbating the problem, and that someone like Alga may be better off using an energy drink or type of drink that has also got some electrolytes in it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that would be in terms of first steps to try and recover from that.
All right, cool. Great stuff. Keep those questions coming. If you want to get a question in, all you need to do is pop them in the comments section below, and then let's have a look at. There was one that I saw that was. Oh, there we go. I had to do. There we go. This is awesome. I love this. Let me put this on the screen. It is from Mfanelo. Mfanelo is saying, what about anxiety? Close to races, I take tonsillitis with fever. Do I need to see a psychologist, or is it a case of just getting better supplements?
Yeah, look, that's a difficult one because, I mean, obviously anxiety builds up, and anxiety causes stress, and the human organism doesn't differentiate stress. So training stress, work stress, family stress, it's all stress. The body deals with it in the same way. So it could be that leading into the race, the stress of the training combined then with this build-up in stress could be having a negative effect on the immune system. Of course, if it's cyclical, in other words, you know it happens every time, seeing a psychologist may teach some coping mechanisms, and so I certainly don't think it's a bad idea, but also knowing that it's coming, you could probably modify a few things. So reducing the training even more so that it reduces the stress on the organism, some vitamins that perhaps Nicki can suggest, take vitamins which can also help to obviously trying not to put yourself into situations where you come into contact with viruses and bacteria. That's difficult because we've probably still got to go to work. But yeah, perhaps some immune boosting supplements, Nicki, that you could recommend.
Pink stuff is also, I mean, it's marketed well, but there's not many that carries face. The ones that I would definitely try and include is in periods of stress, we usually supplement with a good B complex vitamin. Don't supplement them individually. Please supplement them in a combination. Probiotics seem to work, or there's quite good evidence for probiotics and immune system enhancement. So, and now would probably be the time that you start taking them all the way up until Comrades Day. It can't do that much harm. And then the main thing there is to still, if you can't get a variety of food, or your food choices, first baseline to start off is obviously a good old multivitamin. I think the other thing that one must also just consider, maybe Lindsey, in this area is sometimes iron, not so much runners, that you do check in periods where you consistently get sick. Just check iron levels, because that often also can lead to a decreased immune system, and it is so that your iron need will go up throughout this time in terms of training.
All right, cool. A couple of questions in, Lindsey. These are for you. One from Carly. Carly wants to know, when should you start tapering for 2 Oceans? And then the other one is from Brendan. And Brendan wants to know, is that the right one? No, he's saying hello from Neisner. That's the wrong one from Brendan. Brendan, no, I lie. It's from Andre. Andre wants to know, should you taper for Oceans if you're just using it as a long run? So what's the deal with tapering for Oceans?
Yeah, so look, quite a long way from Comrades this year. There are quite a few people that will run it and run both hard. Okay, so it's never my personal choice to do that. There are some basic principles that I stick to with people who do in fact want to run Oceans and Comrades hard. And that is to say that 2 Oceans is not the focus race. So we're not going to do a full-blown taper for 2 Oceans. Really, a week to 10 days at most of cutting is enough for that sort of scenario. And then the other of that equation is that should you run Oceans harder than intended, or you did intend to run hard and therefore it would have taken its toll, then I also am pretty adamant that my athletes then take a week off after Oceans and then take a week to build up, and then we train really hard for 6 weeks in preparation for Comrades. And if you follow those steps, you could probably get away with running both hard, but you have to accept that if you really race Oceans, it's going to compromise Comrades, because it's going to compromise training, and it's not just going to compromise training because of the recovery after Oceans. It's going to through of training, so you just the best quality of training that you would like.
Cool. Lindsey, another question in from Pete Rutherford. Pete wants to know, he's running his first Comrades this year, and he's looking at joining a paying bus somewhere between 8.5 and 9 hours. how does one prepare to train and run with a bus where the driver is dictating the strategy, the pace, when you're walking, when you're running? What's the pacing with the pacing buses?
So I don't know who organizes the pacing buses for Comrades, but I think what I need to try and do is find that out before the next webinar, because for me, if you're going to run on someone else's strategy, then you need to make contact with that person and find out from them. How often are they planning on walking? How are they planning on tackling the hills? Are they going to do a negative or a positive split? But you need to tailor the way you run to that. So my normal advice when this question comes up to me is that I'm not a particular fan of pacing buses. For the race, I feel like a pacing bus, a good place to find yourself in the last third of the motivation is quite important, and having someone think and just lock onto a particular bunch of runners, you will be able, without thinking, you just stick on that pace. But what's difficult about pacing buses is, and the question already alludes to that, is that you lose control of how you're going to run that race. They tend to be quite large, so they attract quite large number of people, which makes it quite difficult to get the nutrition that you perhaps want or used to getting on race day. It also can be quite difficult running and stopping and starting and moving around in that big bus. So I would do a bit of research around Facebook, perhaps get hold of Comrades directly. I certainly will ask them that question, but make contact with the people that are planning on running those 8 and just wrap your head around how they intend to run the race.
Yeah, Pete, as well, just if I can, and this also for everyone, it's my 2 cents worth. I'm one of the runners who's normally hanging out with around about the 12-hour bus. And I find it difficult just from a pacing strategy because I'm a bigger runner. I struggle on the downhill, so I can't run as fast as most of these buses run on the downs. But I'm really strong on the ups. So where a lot of these buses are taking walk breaks on the ups, I'm feeling good. So you almost need to run your own race, know where they are around you, but they're not going to get the medal for you. You still need to run the Ks, and that's just been my experience on how to do these things. Nicki, another question for you, and there's two of them. It's got to do with, I'm not going to put the question up because it is quite an awkward question, so I'm not going to say who asked it. But the first question had to do with the runner's trots, upsets tummy while you're running. Somebody wanted to know what causes it and how can you stop it. That was the other question.
Alrighty, it's pretty much like cramping. There can be zillions of things that causes it. So a lot of the time it's just the movement of the stomach on the road that's causing it. It can be, if I look at nutritional factors, there's some certain obviously risk foods that's involved here that can increase. It would include, as I previously mentioned, something like caffeine. Again, going through a checklist, how close to the run are you actually eating? That's the first thing you need to experiment with. How much are you eating? Fiber component of that meal. Any kind of spiciness in that meal. Some people with milk caffeine in that meal. So those are the things that you need to check out. Oh, and then the fat, but I spoke about that before. So those are the things, if it's nutrition related, that can definitely have an influence. And it's definitely worthwhile, eliminating to see. I mean, if it's only sweet potatoes you can eat before the race, then we eat sweet potatoes if we know that's going to be a safe food. Now, how to stop it is another problem. So fructose intake through fruit can actually worsen this. So one must be careful with that. And I've had a few runners that's, for instance, as well, that is quite a high fructose, high fiber component. So, look at what you're eating and try and alter that a little bit. Go to refined carbs. You can, even the 3 days prior to the race, you can reduce to get the gut as empty as possible. Stuff to stop it, it's usually a lot of people will use medication, which is really not my field of expertise, so I'm not going to comment on that. But we often use something like grated apple. That would be a good thing. So those with small babies would probably have some ideas on how to stop diarrhea. But grated apple, usually inclusion of grated apple then in the meal before you run, or even running with the purity sachets of grated apple sometimes do help, because that seems to set the stomach a little bit. You also get some fiber type of components. It seems weird that I'm talking about fiber and I just said stop it, but some types of fiber like petrite or something will just basically set the stomach more and hold the water in the stomach. So you can even try some of those preparations. But I would say start with the grated apple first, just 1 or 2 spoons. Even if you grate it yourself and let it just brown a bit, that's when it works.
Fantastic. All right. Questions, keep them coming. If just to run through a couple of resources, we are running out of time at a rapid rate, so keep the questions coming in the comments below. If you are looking for one-on-one coaching, if you need specific help, please check out coachparry.com/training, particularly if you are coming from international destinations, whether it's in the US or Europe or Australia. It's often very difficult to train for a race like Comrades on your own. And check out coachparry.com/training. Let's make sure that you come all the way. It is a long way to come. There's a lot of money invested to get you here to Comrades. Let's make sure you go home with the medal that you're chasing. And if you are here in South Africa and you're looking for some one-on-one coaching, then make sure you check out that URL as well. We've got generic training programs that you can get, Comrades programs there as well, coachparry.com/programs. And again, too many questions to answer tonight, and Lindsey and I have been doing these things for 5, 6, 7 years now. There is a massive library of podcasts on coachparry.com. All you need to do in the search bar is type in the question, or if you're asking a question about pacing or injuries, whatever the injury is, I'm willing to bet money on it. We've answered the question at some stage in our Comrades, either webinars like these or the podcast that we do on a weekly basis. So head over to coachparry.com/podcasts. That's where you can get those sort of details. And Lindsey, I have to ask this question because we've had it a few times tonight as well with regards to racing and getting another marathon or an extra ultra in and possibly getting a better seeding. Let's touch on that again. Is it a case of all bets off and go and smash it as hard as you like, or should you be not worrying about that right now and it's simply time the legs, it doesn't matter how long it takes you?
Over again, both with people I work with individually, plus every Comrades talk that I've ever given, that I will tell people no more racing from now on. It's all about preparation, and then they will come and ask me afterwards, but I've got this or but that, and really it's just a question of they are asking the question and hoping that I'll change my mind, and I won't. Because the best thing for you is not to do any racing. It's not to improve your seeding. The best thing for you is to train now. Now is Comrades training season, not Comrades racing season. Comrades racing happens on the 10th of June. So if you truly have Comrades as your ultimate goal and your race that you want to perform in, then stop racing now. If Comrades isn't that important to you, you love the buzz of getting PBs, and you're enjoying that aspect of it, then go for it, race. But accept now that it's going to compromise your Comrades race day.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, we are pretty much out of time. It's been another great session here on the Bonitas Comrades Marathon online seminars. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, like I said, check out the CoachParry.com website. All the podcasts and previous webinars are there. If we've answered a lot of the questions that came up tonight as well on previous webinars. So if you haven't attended the one we did in January, the one we did in February, do yourself a favor, go back and watch those, because I saw lots of questions popping up tonight that we answered in those ones as well. Nicki, any parting shots from you? Is there anything you'd like to add as a final thought?
Yeah, Brad, just as I said, do better every time. Make sure now is not the time to go to be on a diet. Choose a race strategy and stick to it. And again, don't, the same what Lindsey says, don't listen to other people. It's now your race, your strategy, and whatever is going to work for you.
Absolutely. Lindsey, parting shot from you?
Yeah, just again to emphasize Comrades training now, and that hopefully you've got an idea of your race strategy, and that includes nutrition. So what you're going to be doing on race day in terms of your run walk, plus what you're going to be eating race day. We've also told you what's going to be en route on race day. So on your long training runs, let's get used to that, and let's work with those. You know what you're going to do, you know what you're going to eat, and your body's comfortable with both.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. We hope you got lots out of it, and keep those questions coming. CoachParry.com is where you can get all the details from the three of us. Cheers.